So, this is where my story starts. A story I never thought I'd be telling, to be honest. I'm Mike, 36, and I've been married to Laura for 10 years now. We've had our ups and downs, like any other couple, but I always thought we were solid, you know. Laura, she's a force of nature. The kind of woman who knows what she wants, doesn't take from anyone, and yeah, I guess you could call her a bit bitchy at times. But I loved that about her. She could stand up for herself, and I thought we made the perfect team. Laura is complicated, though. She's got this way of keeping things hidden, like she's always one step ahead. Hell, I used to admire her for that, it made her seem mysterious, smart. But I guess it's easy to hide things when you're a pro at it, huh? We've got this beautiful house with a garden out back, thanks to my hard work in construction. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. I've been busting my ass to make it the dream home Laura always talked about. A garden she could relax in, she said. So, we hired a gardener to help out, a guy named Greg. Seemed like a nice enough guy at first. He's younger, fit, always working out there, making sure the roses were trimmed, the lawn looked perfect. Funny thing is, Laura always hated gardening. But suddenly, she's all about spending time out there, talking to Greg about plants like she's Martha Stewart. I didn't think much of it at first. She said it was just relaxing after her stressful days at work. She's an attorney, and yeah, her job can be brutal. But then, I started noticing little things. You know how you just know something's off but you can't quite put your finger on it? Little signs, changes in her routine. She was coming home late more often, claiming she had work stuff to handle. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she'd get these texts late at night, smiling at her screen like some high school kid. And don't even get me started on how much time she was spending in that damn garden. Looking back now, I realize these were all red flags. But at the time, I just thought I was being paranoid. Anyway, I'll leave it here for now. This is just the beginning. If you've ever had that gut feeling that something's wrong, stick around. This story, it's about to get a lot more complicated. After I started noticing the changes, I tried to push it to the back of my mind. I mean, come on, Laura was busy with work, right? She had her demanding cases, late nights, and if she needed to unwind by texting friends or spending time in the garden, what was the harm in that? But the more I ignored it, the more obvious things became. One day, I was out back mowing the lawn and I noticed Greg, the gardener, was there again. Now, normally Greg comes once a week, but recently it seemed like he was at our place more and more. Every time I turned around, there he was, pruning a hedge or watering the damn roses, always around when Laura was home. I walked over to him, just trying to make casual conversation, you know. Hey, man, the garden's looking great, but you don't have to be here so often, right? Laura's been saying you're here all the time. He just smiled, shrugged it off, saying something like, she's asked me to do some extra work, said she wanted to spruce the place up. Something about making it her oasis. I nodded, but inside, my gut twisted. Extra work. Laura had never cared about the garden before, why now? Later that night, I brought it up to her. We were sitting on the couch, watching some mindless reality TV, and I casually said, hey, what's the deal with Greg being around so much? He mentioned you've been asking him to do extra stuff. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes stayed glued to the screen as she muttered, yeah, just thought the garden could use some love. It relaxes me. There was that word again, relaxes. Right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, it just seems like he's here a lot. I didn't know you were so into gardening now. Finally, she looked at me, and there it was, that sharp, defensive edge. What are you getting at, Mike? You think I'm spending too much time in the garden? Is it a crime now to want our place to look nice? I immediately felt like I was the one in the wrong, like I was overreacting. Laura had that way of flipping the conversation on its head, making me question myself. So I dropped it, feeling stupid for even bringing it up. But the cracks were there. I could feel it. A few nights later, something else happened. We were getting ready for bed, and Laura's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She grabbed it quickly, like she always did, but this time, she smiled. A soft, almost hidden smile, but I caught it. "Who's texting you this late?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Oh, just work stuff," she replied, brushing it off like it was no big deal. But the smile, that tiny little smirk, stuck in my mind. Something was definitely going on. I didn't have proof yet, but I could feel it in my bones. I decided to keep watching. Things between Laura and me started to feel off. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and the air just feels heavier? That was us. Conversations felt forced, like we were both tiptoeing around something. Every time I brought up her late nights or asked why Greg was always around, she'd either get defensive or brush me off with some excuse. I started paying closer attention. Not in an obvious way, I didn't want to seem paranoid, but little things here and there. I'd watch how she acted when she got home, see if she was texting late at night, check the garden window when Greg was over. And man, there was always something that felt wrong. One Saturday morning, Laura told me she was heading out to meet some work colleagues for brunch. Nothing unusual about that, except her whole vibe was different. Normally, she's in a rush, barely putting on makeup, and heads out the door with a coffee in hand. But this time, she was glowing. Her hair was done, her makeup was perfect, and she was wearing this dress she usually saves for special occasions. I couldn't help but ask, "Who's the brunch with again?" "Just some of the girls from work," she said, without looking at me as she slipped on her heels. "Why?" I tried to laugh it off. "You look like you're headed to a date, not brunch." She gave me a look, that classic Laura look where she'd make you feel like you just said the dumbest thing ever. "Don't be ridiculous, Mike. I just felt like dressing up for once. You never complain when I'm in sweats." That shut me up pretty quick. But it didn't sit right with me. After she left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something was nagging at me, so I did something I'm not proud of, I grabbed her laptop. I know, snooping is a bad move, but I needed to know if my gut feeling was real or just me going crazy. I opened up her email and started searching. Nothing too incriminating at first, work emails, newsletters, junk. Then I found a series of deleted emails to an account I didn't recognize. No name, just random letters and numbers. The subject line on one of them caught my eye, "This weekend." My heart started racing as I clicked on it. There it was, plain as day, an exchange between Laura and someone who wasn't from work. She mentioned meeting up at the usual spot and something about how she couldn't wait to see him again. My stomach dropped. The words weren't overly explicit, but they didn't have to be. I could read between the lines. I didn't know if the emails were to Greg or someone else, but I knew, right then and there, that I wasn't imagining things. Laura was hiding something from me, and this wasn't just me being paranoid. But here's the thing, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I don't know why, but I needed more. I wanted to be sure, 100% sure, before I blew this whole thing up. So, I decided to play it cool, act like everything was normal. But in my mind, I was watching. Waiting for the cracks to get bigger. And they were about to. After finding those emails, things changed for me. I couldn't look at Laura the same way anymore. Every smile she gave me felt fake, every time she touched my arm, it felt like a lie. But I couldn't confront her yet. I wasn't ready for that fallout, not without being absolutely sure. So, I played along, pretending like everything was normal, while inside I was a wreck. The distance between us only grew. She spent more and more time out of the house, whether it was for work meetings, or just getting out for some air. And whenever she was home, she spent most of her time in the garden. The damn garden. I started to hate that place. It felt like every time I saw her out there with Greg, it was like watching something I wasn't supposed to see. And Greg, man, he wasn't just some friendly gardener anymore. Every time I saw him, he had this stupid smirk on his face. I'd catch him glancing at Laura when he thought I wasn't looking, like there was some unspoken thing between them that only they understood. One day, I came home from work early, just wanted to surprise Laura, maybe spend some time together. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Greg's truck was parked out front, which wasn't unusual, but the house was quiet. No sound of Laura's music blasting from the living room like it usually was when she was home. I walked around back and found them in the garden, talking quietly. They were sitting on the bench, too close for my liking, their heads bent together like they were sharing some secret. Laura saw me first and immediately stood up, that fake smile plastered on her face. "Hey, Mike. You're home early." "Yeah, thought I'd surprise you," I said, trying to sound casual. But I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Greg stood up too, rubbing his hands together. "Just finishing up here," he said, avoiding eye contact. "I'll, be out of your way." I watched as he gathered his tools, my eyes narrowing as he gave Laura a quick nod before heading out the gate. She watched him leave, and when she turned back to me, I couldn't help but ask, "What's going on with you two?" Her eyes flashed with annoyance, like she was tired of the question. "Nothing, Mike. I told you, he's just helping me with the garden." "Helping you a lot lately," I muttered under my breath. She threw her hands up, exasperated. "What is your problem? Are you seriously jealous of Greg? He's the gardener, for God's sake." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw those damn emails in her face and watch her explain them away. But instead, I just stood there, biting my tongue, because the timing didn't feel right. I needed more proof. "Forget it," I said finally. "Just, forget it." But it was far from forgotten. Every day, the tension between us grew thicker. I started working late more often just to avoid being home. Every time I saw her and Greg together, it felt like a punch in the gut, and the worst part was, I still didn't know for sure. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Laura told me she was going out again, work brunch or some other excuse. I watched her get ready, the same way she had the last time, looking a little too perfect for a casual hangout with her colleagues. But this time, I wasn't about to sit at home wondering. After she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I know, it sounds crazy, but at this point, I needed to know the truth. I trailed her car for miles, my heart pounding in my chest the whole way. She didn't go to any brunch spot. Instead, she drove straight to a secluded park, a place we never went to together. And as soon as she parked, Greg pulled up right beside her. I watched from a distance as they met at a picnic table, talking closely, their hands brushing. And that's when I knew, without a doubt, that my suspicions were right. It was happening. Laura and Greg were having an affair. But still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because I needed to catch them in the act. I needed undeniable proof. And I was going to get it. After seeing Laura and Greg at the park, my whole world started spinning. Everything felt like a lie. But as much as it hurt, I still needed more. I needed to catch them in the act. That would be my breaking point, when I'd finally confront her and blow the whole thing up. I spent the next few days carefully watching, planning. Laura was acting like everything was normal, like she hadn't just been sneaking off to meet Greg. And that only made my anger boil more. The way she could lie so effortlessly, keeping up appearances, like nothing had changed. It made me realize just how good she was at hiding things, at covering her tracks. I couldn't keep living in the dark like this. So I set a trap. Laura had mentioned earlier in the week that she'd be working late on Thursday night, something about an important client coming in from out of town. I pretended to be supportive, even offered to pick her up afterward, but she declined, saying she'd grab a ride with a colleague. I didn't push it. I needed her to think I wasn't suspicious. Thursday finally came around, and my plan was simple. I told her I'd be working late too, at a different job site across town. It gave me the perfect excuse to not be home, and it gave her the freedom to do whatever she had planned, with Greg. But I wasn't going to any job site. I parked my car a few blocks away from the house and waited. Sure enough, about 30 minutes after I left, I saw Greg's truck pull up. He didn't even wait, just strolled right into the backyard, like he owned the place. My blood was boiling at this point. I waited a few more minutes to make sure, then I quietly slipped into the house through the side gate. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might give me away, but I had to be sure. I had to know. I crept through the yard, keeping low, careful not to make any noise. And there they were, Laura and Greg, sitting on the bench in our garden, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. But it wasn't just laughing, there was this look between them, something so intimate, like they had a secret only they shared. That's when I saw it. His hand brushed against hers, then slowly moved up to her thigh. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned into it. They were sitting so close now, I couldn't breathe. I had my phone in my hand, ready to snap a photo, ready to document everything. But I was frozen, rooted to the spot, watching the two of them like some scene out of a bad movie. My gut twisted with rage, but I still needed more. This wasn't enough. Then, Laura leaned in, whispering something to Greg, and he stood up, pulling her by the hand towards the back of the yard. My heart dropped into my stomach. That's when I knew where this was going. I followed them, staying in the shadows, until they stopped at the gazebo at the far end of our property. They didn't even bother to go inside, right there in the open, Laura turned to him, and they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not some innocent kiss. It was intense, passionate. And in that moment, I felt everything shatter. My phone was already recording by then. I captured it all, the kiss, the way she melted into his arms, the way they held onto each other like nothing else mattered. I had all the proof I needed. But I didn't storm out right then. No, I wanted to catch them at the worst possible moment. I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. So, I backed away, quietly, without them noticing, and headed back toward the house. I knew they'd come inside soon enough. The trap was set. And when they did, I'd be ready. By the time I got back to the house, my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold my phone. Watching Laura and Greg like that, it was like everything I believed in had crumbled in front of me. The woman I had spent 10 years with, the woman I trusted with everything, was betraying me right in our own backyard. And Greg, this guy who smiled in my face, acted like he was just the gardener, he was nothing but a snake. But as furious as I was, I had to keep my cool. I needed to time this perfectly. I checked the recording on my phone. It had everything, the kiss, the way Laura clung to him, the secret touches. I had them dead to rights. Now, I just had to wait for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. I knew they wouldn't stay outside forever. The air was cool, and dusk was settling in. Sure enough, after about 10 minutes, I heard the back door slide open. I stood in the hallway, out of sight, but close enough to hear everything. Their voices drifted in from the kitchen, low and intimate. Laura was laughing, like she didn't have a care in the world. I clenched my fists, every part of me ready to burst in there and let them have it. But no. I had to wait. I wanted them to think they were safe, that their little secret was still hidden. Do you think he suspects anything? I heard Greg ask, his voice low, almost playful. No, Laura replied, with this casual confidence that made my blood boil. He's completely clueless. I've been handling it. Handling it. Like I was some idiot who couldn't put two and two together. Greg chuckled. I should probably head out before he gets back, though. Don't want to push our luck. There was a pause, then I heard Laura's footsteps as she walked closer to him. Stay a little longer, she said, her voice soft. He's working late tonight. We've got time. That was it. That was the final straw. I stepped into the kitchen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Laura and Greg froze the moment they saw me. The look on Laura's face. I'll never forget it. Shock, fear, and something else, like she knew the game was up. Mike. She stammered, taking a step back. I thought you were at work. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at the two of them, my eyes burning with rage. Greg was already looking for the nearest exit, but I wasn't going to let him off that easy. Yeah, I finally said, my voice steady, even though I felt like I was about to explode. I thought I'd come home early. Lucky me, huh? Laura's face turned pale. It's not what you think, she blurted out, her voice shaky. We were just talking. I let out a bitter laugh. Talking? I pulled out my phone, holding it up so they could see the video I'd taken in the garden. Is that what you call it? Her eyes widened in horror as she saw the footage. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. Greg, on the other hand, had gone completely silent, his face a mix of panic and guilt. Mike, please, let me explain, Laura started, her voice pleading now. Explain what, Laura? I snapped. How long has this been going on? You think I'm some idiot who hasn't noticed what's been happening right under my nose? Greg finally found his voice, stepping forward slightly, trying to be the tough guy. Look, man, this doesn't have to get ugly. Let's just talk about this. I turned to him, feeling the fire rise in my chest. You think you're going to just walk out of here and talk this through? I clenched my fists, trying to hold myself back. You've been cheating my wife in my own backyard, and now you want to have a chat. Greg glanced nervously at Laura, then back at me. Mike, man, I'm sorry. It just happened. You're sorry. I said, taking a step toward him. You're sorry. Laura rushed between us, panic in her eyes. Please, Mike, don't do anything stupid. This doesn't have to get worse. It was taking everything in me not to blow up completely. But I knew this was just the beginning. I had more to say, and they had more to hear. This was the calm before the storm. This was it. The moment everything I knew about my life, my marriage, shattered into pieces. Laura was standing between me and Greg, her hands up like she was trying to keep some kind of peace. The panic in her eyes told me everything, I had them cornered, and they both knew it. Move, Laura, I said, my voice cold, barely recognizing the sound of it. This doesn't involve you anymore. Mike, please, listen, she started, but I wasn't interested in hearing any more of her lies. I stepped around her, locking eyes with Greg. He didn't look so smug now, standing there like a scared little boy caught doing something bad. You think you're just going to walk out of here like nothing happened? I growled at him, stepping closer. He backed up, his hands raised as if that would stop what was coming. How long has this been going on? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? Greg's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mike, man, I didn't mean for this to happen. Didn't mean for what to happen, Greg. For you to be cheating my wife. I was shouting now, my voice echoing off the kitchen walls. The anger had built up so much, I didn't even care about keeping control anymore. How long, Greg? Tell me the truth. Laura tried to cut in, stepping forward again, her voice pleading. It's not like that, Mike. We never meant to hurt you. I spun on her, my face twisted with rage. Never meant to hurt me. Are you kidding me right now? Do you think I'm that stupid? I pulled out my phone again, showing her the video I'd recorded earlier in the garden. This is you not hurting me, huh? Just talking in the backyard. Like I'm supposed to believe that. Laura's face turned pale as she watched herself in the video, the kiss between her and Greg playing out right in front of her. She knew she was caught. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might actually say something honest. But instead, she just shook her head, trying to control her emotions. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear. I couldn't help but laugh, this bitter, broken laugh. Not supposed to go this far. I repeated, almost mocking her. It's already gone too far, Laura. You've been lying to me for who knows how long, sneaking around with him while I'm out there busting my ass to give you the life you wanted. Greg was inching toward the door, clearly looking for an escape, but I wasn't about to let him off that easily. Where do you think you're going? I snapped, cutting him off. You think you can just walk away from this? Look, man, I didn't want this to happen, Greg muttered, his eyes darting between me and Laura, like he was trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. It just happened. We didn't plan it. You didn't plan it? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. So, what, one day you just tripped and fell into my wife's arms? Is that it? How many times, Greg? How many times have you been sneaking around with her? He hesitated, looking at Laura like he was waiting for her to answer. But I wasn't letting him off the hook. Answer me. I shouted, stepping toward him, my fists clenched at my sides. Greg flinched, taking a step back, but he finally muttered, it's been a few months, all right? It just started, a few months ago. My heart dropped. A few months. While I'd been working late, fixing up the house, trusting Laura, they'd been out here, behind my back, laughing at me, lying to me. I could feel my whole body shaking with rage, but more than that, I felt this deep, overwhelming sense of betrayal. I had given everything to this marriage, and this was how it ended. Laura finally broke down, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed, Mike, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I didn't want it to be like this. But it is like this, Laura, I cut her off, my voice cold and steady now. You made it like this. You chose this. There was nothing left to say. I had caught them. The truth was out. Everything was unraveling, and there was no going back. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm that was raging inside me. Greg, I said, my voice low and dangerous, get out of my house. Now. He didn't argue. He grabbed his jacket and practically ran out the door without looking back, leaving Laura standing there, crying in the middle of the kitchen. I didn't care about his apologies, his excuses. He was gone. But Laura. Laura was still here. And now, I had to face the wreckage of our marriage. What the hell was I going to do next? After Greg rushed out, slamming the door behind him, the silence in the house was deafening. Laura stood in the middle of the kitchen, sobbing, her face streaked with tears, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. My whole body was still shaking with anger, but underneath it, there was this cold, hollow pit forming inside me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my wife, it all felt like it had just been ripped away. Laura took a shaky step toward me. Mike, please. I know you're angry, but let's talk about this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I looked at her, barely recognizing the woman standing in front of me. How could she even say that? How could she stand there, asking me to talk about it like this was something we could fix? Like an affair was just some minor speed bump in our marriage? Talk. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What's left to talk about, Laura? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with him. Do you even realize what you've done? She wiped at her tears, trying to pull herself together, but she looked desperate. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but it doesn't have to end like this. We can figure it out. We can. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Figure it out. I cut her off, my voice rising again. Are you serious? You've been sleeping with another man, and you think we can just figure it out? Like this is some misunderstanding? Laura flinched at the anger in my voice, but she didn't stop. She kept talking, trying to explain, trying to fix it. It wasn't supposed to happen, Mike. We got close, and things got out of hand. But it didn't mean anything, I swear. You have to believe me. I felt something snap inside me. Didn't mean anything. I repeated, my voice cold and bitter. You've been betraying me for months, and you want me to believe it didn't mean anything? Every time I came home and you looked me in the eye, knowing you were lying, did that mean anything? She started crying again, harder this time. I was confused, okay? I felt like we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to handle it. It wasn't about you, Mike, it was about me. Don't you dare make this about us, drifting apart, I snapped. I've been here, working hard, trying to give you everything. I've trusted you with my life, and this whole time, you've been, with him. The bitterness in my voice felt like poison, but I couldn't stop. How many times, Laura? How many times did you lie to me, knowing what you were doing? She looked down at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I don't know, she whispered. You don't know. I repeated, disbelief washing over me. You don't even know how many times you've cheated on me. Laura crumbled under the weight of it all, collapsing onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I should have felt something, pain, pity, maybe even forgiveness, but I didn't. I just felt numb. I stared at her for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was probably only a few minutes. The woman I loved, the life we built, everything we'd been through together, it was gone. Just like that. I can't do this, I finally said, my voice quieter now, almost calm. I can't look at you the same way. I can't be with someone who would do this to me. Laura looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear. No, Mike, please. Don't say that. We can go to counseling, we can try to fix it. I love you. I still love you. But I couldn't even hear the words anymore. Love? How could she stand there and say she loved me after everything she'd done? I don't know what love means to you, Laura, I said, shaking my head slowly. But this isn't love. This is betrayal. She stood up, rushing toward me, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back. Please, Mike. Please don't leave me. I don't want to lose you. I made a mistake, but we can get through this. We've been through worse. But this wasn't something we could just get through. I knew that now. I turned away from her, unable to look at her face any longer. I need space, I said firmly. I'm leaving tonight. I'll figure out where I'm going later, but I can't stay here. Not with you. She started crying again, her sobs filling the room as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because if I did, I knew I'd break all over again. As I stepped out of the house, the cold night air hit me, and for the first time in what felt like days, I could breathe. The storm had broken, and now I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces of my life from the wreckage she had left behind. I left the house that night without a plan. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. All I knew was that I couldn't stay under the same roof with Laura, not after what I'd just uncovered. The betrayal was like a weight on my chest, and I needed to get away from it. From her. I drove for what felt like hours, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. Part of me still couldn't believe it. How had I missed the signs for so long? I kept playing back all those moments in my head, Laura's late nights, the way she suddenly became so interested in the garden, Greg's smug little grins. It all seemed so obvious now, like a puzzle that had finally come together. But at the time, I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think she was capable of something like this. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a motel on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where no one asks questions. I checked in, grabbed the key, and headed to the small, dimly lit room. The smell of stale cigarettes hit me as I walked in, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered right now except getting some space, getting my head right. I threw my bag onto the bed and collapsed next to it, staring up at the cracked ceiling. The silence in the room was deafening. It gave me too much time to think, to feel. That's when it hit me. The full weight of what had happened. My wife, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, had been lying to me for months, sneaking around with another man. And not just any man, Greg. The guy I'd trusted to work in my home, the guy who smiled in my face like he wasn't stabbing me in the back the whole time. My chest tightened, and I felt this wave of anger and sadness wash over me, stronger than anything I'd ever felt before. I wanted to punch something, scream, do anything to get it out. But instead, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting it all sink in. I reached for my phone. The messages were still there, Laura's calls and texts from earlier, trying to get me to come back, to talk. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was there to say? What could she possibly say that would make this better? I put the phone down and sat up, running my hands through my hair. I felt like I was unraveling, like everything I thought I knew was slipping away. How do you come back from something like this? How do you move forward when the person you trusted the most has torn your life apart? I must have sat there for hours, just thinking, reliving every moment, every lie. Finally, exhaustion took over, and I lay back down, my mind too numb to keep going. I didn't sleep much, but at some point, I drifted off. The next morning, I woke up to more messages from Laura. I didn't even bother reading them this time. It was the same cycle, her apologizing, asking me to come home, promising that we could fix things. But I wasn't ready to face her, not yet. I didn't even know if I ever could. Instead, I called the only person I could think of, my brother, Jason. He lived about an hour away, and we hadn't talked much lately, but I needed someone. I needed to say the words out loud. He picked up on the second ring. Mike? What's up, man? You sound off. I let out a shaky breath. Yeah. I need to talk to you. It's about Laura. There was a pause on the other end. What happened? I didn't even know where to start, but once the words came, they wouldn't stop. I told him everything, the suspicion, the sneaking around, catching her with Greg, the video. The whole damn mess. When I finished, there was silence. Then Jason sighed. Jesus, Mike. I don't even know what to say. That's a nightmare. Yeah, I muttered. Feels like one. You coming home? He asked, his voice softening. You want to crash here for a while? I can't imagine you'd want to be in that house right now. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but the idea of staying in that motel another night didn't sit right with me. Yeah, maybe, I said. I just need to figure things out. Well, you've got a place here if you need it, he said. No rush. Just, let me know, okay? We hung up, and for the first time in what felt like days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. I had someone in my corner, someone who understood. I stood up, grabbing my jacket and my bag. I wasn't ready to go back home. Not yet. Laura's texts were still lighting up my phone, but I didn't even glance at them. Right now, I needed space. I needed time to think. And for the first time in years, I had no idea what came next. One thing was certain though, nothing would ever be the same again. It's been 6 months since that night, since I walked out of my home, out of my marriage, and out of the life I thought I'd be living forever. I guess that's how things go sometimes. One day you're sure of everything, and the next, everything you know collapses right in front of you. The first few weeks were rough. Really rough. After I left the motel, I stayed with Jason for a while. He's got a small place, but he gave me his couch, his support, and as many beers as I needed to get through it. I spent most of those days trying to figure out what the hell had happened to my life. Every morning, I'd wake up with this tightness in my chest, this ache that wouldn't go away. Laura, of course, kept texting, kept calling. Apologies, explanations, and promises of change. There were days when I almost responded. Days when I thought, maybe, I could hear her out, maybe we could talk. But then I'd remember that moment, seeing her with Greg, the way she lied so easily to my face. And I knew there was no going back. Not for us. Eventually, I stopped checking my phone. I had to. It was the only way to keep from getting sucked back in. One day, after weeks of just floating through life, I decided I couldn't stay with Jason forever. I needed my own space. My own life. So, I packed up the few things I had, rented a small apartment across town, and started trying to piece things back together. At first, it felt impossible. I didn't know how to be on my own anymore. But slowly, day by day, I started to feel like myself again. I got back into my routine, went back to work, started hitting the gym more regularly. Simple things. And, surprisingly, they helped. I stopped thinking about Laura so much. I stopped wondering where things had gone wrong. I just let go. It wasn't easy, and there are still days when the memories creep back in, but they don't hurt the way they used to. I even started going out again. Met a few new people, made a couple of friends. I wasn't ready for dating yet, but for the first time in a long while, I felt free. No more lies. No more betrayal hanging over my head. Just peace. As for Laura, I hear about her from time to time. Jason still keeps in touch with some of our mutual friends, and apparently, she's not doing so great. I guess I should feel sorry for her, but I don't. It's not that I hate her, I don't think I have the energy for that anymore, but whatever she's going through now, she brought on herself. From what I hear, she's been reaching out to people, reminiscing about our relationship, talking about how she wishes she could go back and fix things. I guess the reality of what she lost finally hit her. But it's too late now. There's no fixing what she broke. Greg? Well, he's out of the picture. Apparently, things fell apart between them not long after I left. Go figure, right? The guy who snuck around with another man's wife wasn't exactly relationship material. I don't think about him much. He's just a chapter in a story I'm glad is over. Now, when I wake up in the morning, there's this sense of calm. I'm not living in the shadow of someone else's lies. I'm not second-guessing myself, or wondering what's really going on behind my back. It's just me. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm okay with that. I've learned that life doesn't always go the way you plan, but sometimes that's for the best. Sometimes, the worst thing that can happen to you is exactly what you need to move forward. So yeah, I've moved on. Laura's still stuck in the past, from what I hear, clinging to what we had and the mistakes she made. But that's her burden to carry, not mine. As for me, I'm just trying to live my life, one day at a time. And honestly, I feel better than I have in years. I don't know what comes next, but for the first time, I'm ready for whatever it is.